Hi there. Thanks for coming out. I was just in Seattle before here, and I didn't get the key to Mount Vernon, Washington, and my crowd was good, but it wasn't as good as Glenn Beck's crowd at Safeco Field. They had a huge rally for Glenn Beck, and I was warning people before they came in that even if they closed the dome, they should bring umbrellas because Glenn might cry. I fear for my country. You know, I like to say they love their country, they just don't like it very much. And Glenn Beck, I didn't get to write about him in my book. My book ended with Obama's inauguration. It's sort of the compilation of my 6 years of research and reporting on the Christian right and on the radical right, the movement that I think took over the Republican Party, transformed it, and shattered it. And it shattered it by bringing personalities like Glenn Beck into the party. This is a former cocaine and alcohol addict who was able to only repair his life by using conservatism as a form of cheap self-medication. As the brilliant mind of Joy Behar said today on The View, Glenn Beck has transferred his alcohol addiction into an addiction to attention. And this is really typical about a lot of the people I write about, although I want to go deeper into that, get beyond who they are and what they do, and talk about why they are the way they are. And I also want to talk about how we got to where we are. My history, the history in my book, the background, kind of diverges from a lot of the more conventional histories of the conservative movement. It doesn't start with the Goldwater campaign. It starts in the Armenian genocide when the Rushduni family fled from the town of Van, which was besieged by Turkish troops. And a young boy named R.J. Rushduni, Rusas John, was spirited out of the town and taken to California. He was the descendant of 6 generations of high aristocratic priests from the oldest Christian country in the world. But after this traumatic experience he decided that civilization was fallen, irredeemable under secular government. And after finishing divinity school, he mapped out a plan for replacing the United States Constitution and its secular government with a theocracy rooted in Leviticus case law. So healthcare, road building, schooling would all be replaced by the church. The criminal justice system would be replaced by Leviticus case law. So evildoers such as feminists, abortion doctors, disobedient children, blasphemers, and witches would all be executed, perhaps by a firing squad, which you could call the Christian right's trigger option. Rushduni's son-in-law, Gary North, who is an economics advisor to Ron Paul, who's been doing a series of talks with the brilliant Michelle Bachmann recently in Washington, believed that the evildoer should be stoned to death because stones are cheaper. You know, he's an economist. It'd be easy to dismiss characters like this, but they actually bore an immense influence on the Christian right during the 1960s as the movement was incipient, was coming into its own. Rushduni's biggest influence was on someone named Howard F. Amundsen Jr., who was the sugar daddy of the Christian right. When Amundsen Jr. was 18, he inherited $300 million from his father, who is this famous philanthropist in California, who founded Washington Mutual. His mother died, his father was dead, he was alone in a mansion, and he went crazy, literally, and was sent to the Menninger Clinic in Kansas, a mental institution. And when he came out, he encountered Rushduni back in California, and Rushduni helped him restore and stabilize his life through this extreme totalitarian brand of Christianity. He became Amundsen's surrogate father, and Amundsen became his financial angel. In 1985, Amundsen declared, "My goal is the total integration of biblical law into our everyday lives." I was the first journalist in 15 years after he declared that to interview him, and he tried to distance himself from some of what Rushduni said. His wife speaks for him because he has Tourette's syndrome and he's a recluse. And she told me, you know, I don't think all the 10 Commandments should replace the Constitution, just 7 of them. Marvin Olasky, who helped George W. Bush create the Office of Faith-Based Initiatives, has footnoted Rushduni in numerous writings of his. And if you look at what the Faith-Based Initiative did, it accomplished a lot of Rushduni's goals in boiling down government to the church, returning all these social services to the church. So you see this convergence that's totally unique in America, in the American right, of libertarianism and totalitarianism. The European right usually fuses a form of like big government populism with their extremist racialist ideology. So Rushdoony gave the Christian right its blueprint, but where did it get its tactics from? How did they come into the mainstream? It was through someone named Francis Schaeffer, an equally iconoclastic figure, who used to run a hippie commune in the Swiss Alps called La Brie. This was a tolerant environment for Christians where the Jesus freak movement flourished. Openly gay people would study there. Schaeffer would lecture all night about Pablo Picasso, about John Cage, and how this fit into Christianity and the teachings of Jesus. Timothy Leary visited there, the LSD guru. Jimmy Page was seen with a copy of one of Francis Schaeffer's books, the Led Zeppelin guitarist. But when the Roe v. Wade decision was handed down, Schaeffer snapped. He became radicalized, and he believed that the government had just legalized infanticide, or death panels. It would soon implement death panels. He went to Washington with his enormous skills as an evangelist. He began to evangelize the Republican leadership, became good friends with Gerald Ford, who was president at the time. And he also befriended Jerry Falwell, who was preoccupied for decades with stopping racial integration in the South. He denounced Martin Luther King from the pulpit for being too political and also for being a communist traitor. And Schaeffer told Falwell, we need to use the tactics of Martin Luther King to stop abortion because this is the wedge issue that will help us attack the sick underbelly of secular society and unravel America's constitutional government so we can implement our agenda. As Schaeffer went on, he founded the Moral Majority with Falwell. Reagan told the Moral Majority, I know you can't endorse me, but I endorse you. The Christian right came into Washington. The Republican Party was absorbing these elements and winning elections across the Sun Belt, across the West, across the Midwest. But Schaeffer became, first of all, frustrated because he couldn't stop abortion, and he began advocating domestic terrorism, what he called force in the domestic posture, giving rise to groups like Operation Rescue. An Operation Rescue member recently assassinated Dr. George Tiller in Kansas. And at the same time, Schaeffer became disillusioned with the Christian right. He considered Falwell to be a charlatan. He thought Pat Robertson was literally insane. And if you read my book, you can see some of Robertson's background that actually might confirm that. But Schaeffer came to this conclusion when Robertson was bragging to him over dinner that he burned a Modigliani painting in his fireplace. And he was dying of cancer and wanted to denounce the Christian right, especially because of this homophobia he saw seeping into the movement's rhetoric. But it was too late. He had created a monster. Someone who watched Schaeffer very carefully was a child psychologist named James Dobson. He was always at his lectures. Schaeffer loathed Dobson. His son told me this. His son Frank is an outspoken opponent of the Christian right, and he's become a friend of mine, and he's written some really favorable reviews of my book, saying he got my father right. He did advocate domestic terrorism, and if he had been a black man, he would have been thrown in prison. Instead, I was swimming in Gerald Ford's pool. Who is James Dobson? He's the most powerful figure in the Christian right, even though he's old and maybe close to death.